All right, first things first, can you give me your name, your title, and then spell your name for me, please?
Chris Becker, Kent County Prosecutor, Chris Becker.
All right, so we're going to talk today about the careless discharge of a firearm causing death charge that was charged on the juvenile who was involved in the shooting death of 13-year-old Gabriel Hojnacki in Grand Rapids. I know you can't give specifics on the case necessarily, but I do have one question that you might be able to answer. So before we start talking about the charges, the juvenile system, I just want to know, is there any information available or ongoing investigations as to how these juveniles got a hold of the gun in the first place?
Well, it's still under investigation. You kind of tailed out there a little bit, but I think you said, is there any, there's an investigation ongoing. We did make this initial charge with the juvenile, but the police are continuing to investigate.
Okay, so will that information as to how the juveniles got a hold of the gun become public once the investigation is complete?
Don't know. That all kind of depends because a lot's tied in with the juvenile. It's tied in with a juvenile case, and we don't think criminally on the adult. We probably won't because almost everything juvenile remains, sealed and private because of the age of the person. So I don't know at this point in time.
Okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the charge itself as well as the juvenile system. Can you tell me a little bit about what constitutes a careless discharge and what type of charge it is?
It's technically a 2-year high misdemeanor. That's what it would be in the adult court. That 2 years, the maximum penalty. I think it's a $2,500 fine. But obviously in the juvenile court, it's a little bit different. There is no 2-year. They can't go to prison. They can't even go to jail. So it's a little bit different in terms of when you're looking at maximum penalties. But a careless discharge is just that. It's a discharge that was somehow done carelessly, negligently. It wasn't intentional, but however they handled was careless in the way that it occurred. And in this case, causing death is more of a specific high misdemeanor versus if it's just a simple careless discharge, it would be a 93-day misdemeanor.
Okay. And then with the juvenile system, how does that punishment exactly apply if they were to be, let's say, convicted of a high misdemeanor versus just a misdemeanor?
To be honest, not very much different. I mean, I think probably the biggest change is how long they're essentially be on probation, because once again, in the juvenile system, we do have a juvenile detention facility, but the juvenile detention facility is not used in the same way as the Kent County Jail or even send them to prison. I mean, there are lockdown facilities for juveniles but those are reserved for the very serious, murder, maybe a rape. There's just not enough of the lockdown juvenile facilities, and they're exceedingly expensive, which is posing a problem for our more serious cases. So for something like this in a 2-year, would be a 2-year and 93-day, the person's essentially going to be put on some sort of probation, juvenile probation, with counseling, treatment, services, maybe even looking at what's going on in the family to try and help that juvenile rehabilitate and not do something like this again. So it's very different in terms of the punishment that a juvenile faces versus when they're in the adult system.
Okay, and then so if convicted, does this conviction stay on the juvenile's record through adulthood, or is it get expunged, or how does that work?
Basically, it says a juvenile, so it does not carry with them in the adult record. There'd be nothing that shows up in their adult history. Now, for some reason, they continue their criminal behavior as an adult. We would add access to it, and we could use that to score sentencing guidelines for whatever offense they committed as an adult. They would get points, if you will, that may impact their sentence as an adult. But in terms of reporting it to somebody or having a employer or somebody along those lines look at that, that would not be the case.
Okay, so just basically, if the person does end up getting in trouble again, this might be able to be used during sentencing. Okay,
sure.
And then how often do you see a type of charge like this for juveniles in a given year in the county? Is it a very common charge, or do you see this very rarely?
Well, causing death is probably fairly rare, but we just had a careless discharge. It was up north. There was a brother that was shot or something along those lines that caused injury. So we right now in the juvenile system, we get the full gamut of just about any charges. I mean, it's not unusual to see weapons charges with juveniles right now, unfortunately, and that's somewhat the scary thing and very concerning thing for law enforcement in terms of the level of crimes that we're seeing with firearms in the juvenile system that we are trying to react to and probably need some more tools in how we properly deal with them, because it is becoming a much bigger problem, weapons offenses in the juvenile system.
Okay, and then is there like any sort of common outcome for these types of charges? Let's say with causing death, are they usually convicted in these types of situations, or how does that work?
I mean, it's an adjudication. It's not even unless it's a conviction. It's an adjudication. So technically, yeah, you can still. I think one of the questions was, can you have a trial? Yeah, you can go to a trial on this. We don't have that many jury trials because the whole focus of the juvenile system is rehabilitation. So very often these cases plead because the idea is to try and get the services into that juvenile and the juvenile's family to correct their behavior. So yeah, they may very often they plead, they're adjudicated guilty, and then the services take place. So it's something where it's very similar to the adult system, but it is also very different because it just doesn't have the same outcomes that I guess we're all familiar to and how it's dealt with.
Okay, and then I guess adding on to that a little bit, what are some of the services that are provided outside of just like counseling? Are there like
It depends. I mean, it really depends on the specific, the idea is you get a juvenile probation officer, they'll take a look at that juvenile, and it depends on what the needs are. Is there mental health? Is there substance abuse? I mean, even juveniles today have substance abuse issues. Is it depression? Is it, is there something with the family? Is it, sometimes a food necessity? There's a, they try and take a look as best they can and get what service they can. So it runs the gauntlet of just about anything that any adult may have. And trying to help out. So yeah, there's a lot of counseling, but there could be substance abuse. There could be a whole other things. Maybe it could be just trying to get them to get in school and stay in school and participate there. As we have a truancy court that we're working on that with families, just trying to get them into school. So it could be just about anything.
Okay, and then with probation in these types of situations, what types of how does the probation work for the child?
Just like any other probation, essentially. I mean, there's reporting. You have a juvenile probation officer, and you have to maintain contact with a probation officer, and they'll keep an eye on, how that juvenile is doing. They can be brought before the judge if they're not doing well, and they could impose some sanctions. Those sanctions do not necessarily include jail or prison. It's just different, maybe fines. Maybe they try and get them, different counseling or something like that. Maybe it could be a stint in detention for a little bit. But the whole focus is rehabilitative in that nature, not punitive. That's more, the adult system is more punitive.
Okay. And then to circle way back, I just thought of this now. So when the child becomes an adult, if they've been adjudicated in plea, let's say guilty to the charge, I know it won't show up on their record, but will or could it have any effect of the child purchasing a firearm when they are an adult, or is there any restrictions there?
Not that they have a clean record. I wouldn't necessarily. Now the juvenile system could maintain jurisdiction over them for more of the serious cases till they're 21. So that could have a prevention in terms of, while they're on sort of juvenile probation or something along those lines, that they, wouldn't be able to. But I guess, for something, that happened when they're very young, it doesn't show up on their record. It probably would not show up. I can't say I've ever come across that off the top of my head, but I don't think it would come across because it's not a conviction. It's not a conviction on somebody's record. It happens as a juvenile. It's an adjudication, and that's sealed.
Okay. All right. I think that's all I've got for you. Is there anything else you wanted to add about this type of charge or about the juvenile system that we didn't touch on?
Just I think maybe refocusing on the issue, that the problem that we're having just now with the juvenile system in terms of finding ways to really work with these families, and we're very limited. I mean, I think the public thinks we can do kind of everything we can with juveniles, and we necessarily can't. We don't have the type of placements, we don't have lockdown facilities as we do, and so that's kind of a challenge right now in how we handle these, more violent offenses, more weapons offenses, to really be able to deal with those appropriately. I mean, we want to be able to, hopefully rehabilitate the juvenile, but there's also some significant safety risks for the public that, we're concerned about, and we don't have a whole lot of good options right now.
All right. Anything else? That's pretty much all I need.
Nope, that's it.